There's a Haley Beck in every school in America. So, in case you missed it, Haley Beck is like a 28-year-old high school teacher. She's teaching juniors, seniors, and it came out recently that she was having an inappropriate relationship with a student. There was another teacher involved. But Haley has been focused on specifically because a bunch of her text messages and videos have been leaked showing her in the classroom, showing how she behaved around students, and the communications with the students, which basically sound like she's totally in love with this kid and he's not really that into her at all. And while that might be entertaining for some, as a parent, it's incredibly concerning. There was a time when there was a teacher at my kid's school that had allegations like this. And I remember very clearly where it started. He had come home one day and he said the teacher had said something like, "Don't tell your parents." And it was just a casual thing. I just felt like it was too buddy buddy. It was too casual. It was like nothing you would say if you wanted to keep your job. And I just kept asking him, like, how old is this teacher? Is this like a younger person? Have they been teaching very long? And every indication that he gave was like that this was a person who had been at the school for a while or had been teaching for a while, but it just did not sit right with me at all. Once we had these conversations, I told my son pretty early on that I was concerned, and I told him specifically of what. I told him about grooming. We talked about some of these other cases that have come up before this. So he already knew to be on guard for this particular teacher. And it's one of those things that you don't think you're ever going to talk to your kid about this sort of thing before you become a parent. But once you do, you realize if you don't give them the tools going into the situation, they might not really experience what it's like until it's too late. And you don't want them to be unawares. So I told him, be on the lookout for any inappropriate touching, anything he says, asking for any additional communication between him and another student, and to look out for your friends because maybe you're not the target. Maybe it's someone else. And obviously, he's not responsible for the safety of the other students in the classroom. They might not be having the same conversation with their parents. The scariest thing is that originally we would hear about these stories and it would always be a high school student. But the more prevalent this seems to have become, now we're hearing about middle school and then elementary school and even some like younger kids in that, which is terrifying. So you got to have these conversations way earlier than I ever expected to. And it's not what I want to do, but I want to protect my kid, and this is the best way I know how. So I would always keep tabs on him every single time, every day he had that class. I'd be, hey, how's it going over there? Is he saying anything weird? Is he doing anything weird? And he'd tell me some little joke that the teacher said, or the teacher would be talking about things that they were kind of into when they were a kid, and I was just like, I don't know why he's saying that. Like it just feels too much like I want to be your friend, and I don't want my teachers to be my kid's friend. They're there to teach. I hope they have a good relationship. I hope it's amicable. I hope they learn a lot, but y'all don't have to be friends. This connected society we have has encouraged all of this additional communication with teachers and students outside of the classroom. And for the most part, it really shouldn't be necessary. Like, hey, you need to follow up on an assignment, maybe you shoot them an email. But once we're talking about getting their Snapchat or following them on Instagram, we've crossed all types of boundaries that I'm not interested in discussing. We've also blurred the lines as to what is appropriate and inappropriate in schools. I remember there being a very clear line when I was a kid, but now because of curiosity and whatnot, kids are looking up teachers and vice versa. And that's when it starts to get scary. Fast forward to months later into that school year, I got an email from the school and it said that there was an investigation because a student had come forward about an incident on a field trip, and they merely mentioned the subject that the teacher teach, and I knew it was him. I knew it was him, and I was like, hey, has that teacher been in school? I don't know. I haven't seen him because he didn't have a class anymore. He said, I don't know. And then he went back and he checked and he's like, oh, yeah, they're saying it's him. Probably the scariest part about this story in general is that a lot of people knew. Like, this was a pretty open secret. I mean, there's students coming out now and telling their stories about what they suspected or what they knew. It wasn't just some activity that occurred behind closed doors. She was going to like high school parties. This was not normal, but still, no one said anything. He was a high school student. I'm not going to speculate on the specifics of things, but From what I gather, he was somewhat of a star athlete, so maybe administrators looked the other way because they wanted to keep his eligibility up. I don't know. The main thing is that people said nothing. They never got into the specifics. There was no news report or arrest, as far as I know. But the thing is, you gotta talk to your kids. Like, you can be your kid's friend, or at least you can have the relationship where your kids feel comfortable talking casually about things. Because if my son did not feel comfortable talking to me, he probably would have never mentioned anything past the teacher said don't mention it to your parents, because he didn't think it was that big of a deal. And then when I tried to press him on it, he was like, don't escalate it, don't say anything to the teacher, just because he didn't want to be a problem. But that's how these things start. It's innocent and it's cool and it's casual, and then it's too much, and then it's over the line, and then it's out of control. I don't ever want to feel like I didn't protect my kid. So I'm always going to have those conversations. I'm going to make sure I'm in every single teacher's face, because even if the kid is 16, 17, that's still a predator, man. Like, you're in a position of authority, you're their teacher. You're not supposed to be messing with the students, man. With my kid, my main concern was just the pattern of behavior. Why is he telling the kids, don't tell your parents? That should never be something that a teacher says. Maybe he ran into a student casually on the weekend, sure, but why is he trying to force a communication after the fact? What could you possibly have to talk about? Why is he always talking about things that are clearly not class material? But I only know these things because I forced them out of my son. Because for the most part, he didn't think a lot of these things were that big of a deal. The way they handled it, I thought, was a little bit odd, because there was an email that came out. They said there was an incident. They didn't even name the person specifically. I asked him, and then all of a sudden that teacher was just removed. There was no arrest. There was no news report. And that's disappointing, because as a parent, I don't know the full extent of what actually happened. But that's why it's our job as parents to try to bestow wisdom on these kids, because they just don't get it. They think we're old and we're outdated and we don't understand how things are these days. But we all had a cool teacher. We just didn't know very much about him outside of the classroom. And that's the way I like it. When you watch these news reports, don't ever think that this person is so far removed from you. They are 100% in your school district. It's interesting. We never used to hear these stories at all. And now there's a new one every single week. So obviously, this has been going on. We just didn't know about it.